I'm going to do some intros so you have time to get back to the computer. So next up, we have a three-part panel of folks with experience in digital projects to share with you. So first will be Russ Hanson, who's a technical specialist and a volunteer with the Sterling Eureka Laketown Historical Society. And he's been chiming in with some great suggestions throughout the morning so far. He began using computers in college and spent his career at the Mayo Clinic working on computers in medicine and research. He is a member of several local history societies and is immersed in digitizing records of all kinds. Jodi Kiffmeyer is the archivist at the Chippewa Valley Museum. While in grad school, Jodi participated in Recollection Wisconsin's Curating Community Digital Archives project, which we talked about a little bit at the beginning, completing an internship at the Barron County Historical Society in 2018. She joined the board of directors at the Barron County Historical Society in January 2019 and continues to manage their digital and physical archives. Since February 2020, she's served as the archivist for the Chippewa Valley Museum in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. She has some very interesting experiences because she started her job at the Chippewa Valley Museum like weeks before the pandemic hit. And so remote work has been something very interesting at her organization. And then finally, Jennifer Gurske is the Program and Technology Manager at the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation, where she supports their mission of educating about and advocating for historic places in the Madison area. To make their archival information more accessible to the public, Jennifer has spent the last 3 years overseeing the digitization of their archives while learning how to advance the project with limited resources and staff, which I know lots of you will relate to. All three of these panelists have been subjects of digital readiness case studies that I talked about in the past several months. Check out the case studies, which I will link to in the chat as soon as I stop talking, which is right now. So Russ, take it away.
Good morning. There are 2 points I'd like to get across today. One is that digitizing your information in your museum makes it much more usable to you. And the other is that digitization for a small museum can be done, but it sometimes takes sharing with other museums or history societies in your area. Our society, the Sterling Eureka Laketown Historical Society, is a 2-room museum, a 3-township museum along the St. Croix River in northwest Wisconsin. So we are very small, and yet we have access to probably all of the technical information or equipment we need to just about do any kind of digitization. My own background is a career at Mayo Clinic, where the goal was everything that is there, images, documents, notes, everything would be digital. And that has, over the time I worked there, I worked on those projects, and everything is digital at Mayo Clinic now, that at least I'm aware of. I'm retired from there. And when I retired, I had some time to work with museums. I had already done that before. And so I helped start the, I'm going to call it CEL, that's Sterling Eureka Laketown Historical Society, in 2000, and started digitizing things there just because I was interested in it. And at the time, we didn't have digital cameras, but we could get old computers that were cast off and old scanners that were cast off. And so I started, and the museum actually supported that we digitized things that we had. And so that was our start, free. I had some tech expertise. Well, when I retired from working and being used to having all of the state-of-art equipment, I thought, okay, I can't really handle this obsolete equipment anymore. How can we get things that are better and more up to date? And it turns out that you can get individual pieces of equipment for something like $1,000 or less that is pretty good, and that includes computers. So, and most of our history, and I also joined several history societies in the area, Luck, St. Croix Falls, the county, the Genealogy Society, and in all of them was the technical person, and realized that each one of those could apply for small grants under their own name if we could have kind of a comprehensive idea of where we were going. And so you talk to each board and you say, we're going to work together to do these projects, and we're going to get some equipment, but we're going to do it together without spending any of our own money. And of course, that goes over quite well. And the second part, I'm going to get into more of this, getting this stuff, but the second part of it is the motivation for why would you do this? I had an interest in history along with working in the technical field. And so everything that I read, I wished I could remember it. And so I was wanting to scan things. I had it on paper originally, and I wanted to scan things and things we had in the museum. And so that's what that kind of was the motivation, especially with the genealogical side. My father had encouraged me to start doing family genealogy before he died, and you get all of this information, and it's overwhelming if you don't have some way of storing it well. I'm going to give you just a case study that will, just for the motivational part of it. Okay, 3 years ago, I took over as sexton of a local 1857 cemetery in my neighborhood, the Wolf Creek Cemetery. The records, and I was asked to do that mostly because the records were a real mess. They weren't kept very well. They were recipe cards, old fragile maps, handwritten minutes, books lacking in completeness, handwritten, all sorts of some typewritten things. And I thought, okay, the first thing I'd like to do is get images of every page so I don't have to open up a book that might fall apart or something. So I went to the Cushing, our museum in Cushing, the Cell Museum, where we had a camera that we had on a stand that we got from a Wisconsin Historical Society mini grant, and it just lay the book under the camera. It's on a little stand, and you use a foot pedal and then flip the pages. And so I scanned about 1,000 images. Then I moved those without doing anything other than every type of image. Recipe cards were in one folder, receipt book in another folder. And I moved them. I created a free Google Gmail account for our cemetery, which also gave me 15 gigabytes of free disk storage on the cloud. So I moved all of our 1,000 or more images to that. And once there, Google automatically does optical character recognition on any typewritten or printed information, almost 100%. And handwriting does about 60–70%, maybe, depending on the person's handwriting. So now all of those thousands of pages and images I can search. And so immediately all of the stuff was there, so that if someone said, in lot 32, is there a James Johnson? I could just ask Google, can you search for James Johnson or lot 32 or something like that. So it made my life as sexton amazingly simple. The latest part I'm doing on there is taking pictures of the gravestones, although some of them are already on Find a Grave. Because if I put a picture of the gravestone in, Google recognizes the names and dates on that, so they become part of my searchable thing. And I really love the idea that I didn't have to do any metadata or information about them. I just put the pictures there, and they're usable and searchable. That's true with audio information. At home, I have a Google Home and Alexa, so I can ask it, who was the 13th president, and get an answer. Well, it turns out that software is available for doing the same thing, with audio recordings. My images that I've taken from the History Society, we had the Polk County Fair last week, and I want to make some posters. So I made use of, first of all, the all-in-one scanner that will do printing of 13 by 19 color prints that we got through a grant at the Quitting Museum, and at one at the, no, this one's at the Luck Museum, I remember. And so I printed those out, but I wanted to do an old tractor. So I went to the something like 500,000 images we have for the History Society, and I said, find, or I just searched on Google, tractor. And something like 70 pictures came up that had tractors. I didn't have the name of the file as tractor or something, some I did, but others, artificial intelligence tells Google what a tractor is, and it looks for something that looks in its mind like a tractor. That gets continually better. So the digitization becomes almost magically usable by these techniques. Facial recognition works the same way. Video clip recognition actually is happening now too. So once you have it digitized, it becomes, without much work, just amazingly usable. And I expect that to improve in the future so that we'll have to do less effort in our metadata and more information, or more of it will just be automatically there. Digitization is really just taking something, a picture, a sound or something, and turning it into a computer readable thing. So you don't, the object is copied, and that could be a three-dimensional rotating image of a item in your museum, could be just a copy of a document or a picture. But once it becomes digitized and in numbers, computers are really good and are improving at understanding what is in that. Let's see here.
Hi, Russ.
It's done.
No, you have like 2 more minutes, and you told me to let you know. So you got 2 more minutes.
Okay, so
But this is all great information. So keep going.
Here's how we get the money nowadays to do this. We write mini grants to the Wisconsin Historical Society for something like $700, I believe, or is something like the maximum. And so for our foot pedal camera that cost us something like $500, we wrote a mini grant, and we promised them that we would share that with all of the local history societies in Northwest Wisconsin if they wanted to do that, because we really didn't have a need for that for 100%. Another example is our large format negative scanner, high resolution scanner that will do glass negatives up to 8 by 10 or something like that. And we really had hardly any use for that, having about 50 negatives to scan, and glass and others. So that we also wrote a grant, which was about $700 for that one. We supplied a computer for it, but to the Wisconsin Historical Society mini grant, and promised Janet and the rest that we will share this. And so it has been out at something like 5 or 6 different historical societies where we teach them how to use it, and then they use it, and then they do their negatives, and those are shared resources. And I found out that if you write a grant for a shared resource of something, it's pretty likely to happen, because that's the goal of things. I don't know if I got my 2 points across, but I'll stop. The advantages of doing it. We just finished the county fair. Our local history society has approximately 20 books out now on local history, very limited interest, but it's out. We sell about $500 worth of those per year, come out with 1 new one a year, and it's all used from our digital collections of pictures and documents with a little bit of text between it. So at the fair this year, we sold something like 600. This year we sold for 5 different historical societies about $600 worth of books in 4 days. So there are some financial advantages.
Thanks, Russ. We'll see if we have more time at the end. We'll leave some room for questions. All right, Jodi, take it away.
All right, let me make sure I'm unmuted here. Everyone can hear me. So I am the archivist at the Chippewa Valley Museum. Like Kristen said, I have been here a little bit over a year, started 4 weeks before the shutdown. And so I had to train myself at home for much of the first few months. So hold on, I just want to make sure that you can hear me because my speaker view isn't coming up.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, it's just not coming up on my screen. Okay, so my starting out my job was kind of a crash course. Fortunately, I had a predecessor who was great at organizing projects and had already started a digitization project. I came in the middle of, and so I had the opportunity to take her work and build on it, but also find out how we use photos in order to further our mission statement. So next slide, please. So the first way that we use the photos and documents that we digitize is to reach people. And the mission of the Chippewa Valley Museum is to connect people to our community and inspire curiosity by collecting, preserving, and sharing our region's historical and cultural resources. Chippewa Valley is, it's the Chippewa River Valley that goes through northwestern and down through west central Wisconsin. A lot of logging history, a lot of photos about resorts and businesses in Eau Claire. The Chippewa Valley is much wider than just the city of Eau Claire, but our collections do focus on Eau Claire. So trying to connect people to this community of the Chippewa Valley, we have found that digitized photos in particular have been a good way to do this. And me personally, as far as my job in doing this would be on social media. Every week on Wednesday afternoons on the museum's Facebook page and Instagram page, I have a post that I'm responsible for, just a little bit showing a photo and then a little bit of history of the photo about the wider Chippewa Valley outside of Eau Claire, because it is often overlooked. So here you see an example of one of the posts that I've done. This was from a few weeks ago, and it got quite a bit of attention, so that's why I chose it. But in general, our reach is, several hundred to a few thousand people. That's who we're reaching generally with these posts. This one did get a lot of shares. It got 48 shares. But beyond me using the photos for this kind of social media, it's also used by other staff for their social media posts. Local newspapers, or the one local newspaper, the Eau Claire Leader Telegram, every week they feature one of our digitized photos in their newspaper. And we actually, I'll talk a little bit more about that because we do get, we get some income from people who see that. Another way that we've used it, and I think if some of you have attended another one of the digital readiness fairs, we have Clio tours that we link to from our website and also just make available to the public. Clio is a free resource for making virtual tours online. And so we had a grant to put some of our information up on Clio and then use our digital photos to illustrate a before, what the site would have looked like before, and then people can stand in the area and see exactly what it looks like today. So it's kind of a walking tour type thing, but that's how we've used our photos to reach people. Next slide. We are able to get donations by using our digital files. This is another example of a social media post from last summer that caught the attention of a descendant of the boys in the picture. And so this was it was exciting to hear from this gentleman. He actually lives in New York City, and the family still owns the cabin, and actually the family is quite well connected to each other. And so he said that he has, they have several more, a couple of boxes of glass plate negatives, and then some digitized video from the 1930s, I believe, of people at the cabin. And so he's actually talking to his relatives, hoping to make that a donation here. But one of the stipulations for the donation has been that he wants it to be accessible to the public in some way. And so, digitizing photos will enable us to do that. We've looked at options for hosting on, through the Milwaukee Public Museum with Recollection Wisconsin. We've looked at partnering with other libraries in the Chippewa Valley in order to, to work through wills and some of the other places. So we're still not completely sure yet how we're going to do this, but we're still waiting on the donation. The donor was going to be talking to relatives, getting more background on the photos and things like that. So we're connecting with descendants. We're also jogging memories from people on social media who see our photos and then they, tell a story, or they'll tag someone who knows about the collections. We've had interesting photos that have been shared with us that relate to the ones that are already in our collection. We do get help from the public with identifying people and places in our photos. So when we post on social media, occasionally someone will contact us and say, oh, hey, I know that person that's in the photo. We had actually the Camp Phillips social media post that was on the previous slide. I was contacted by a woman who it was her grandfather that was in one of the photos, and we did not have him labeled. So we've been able to gather more information about our donations because we have our photos digitized and because we've made them available to the public on social media. And the next slide, and this is probably what a lot of people will be interested in because we do make money off of our photos. We have a website, the Chippewa Valley Museum website. We linked to, well, we have a page on there that talks about our policies. And actually, I think Kristen will have that link for you later. But here's just a screenshot of our image reproduction and use fees. And this handout will also be available to you that Kristen will share. So this is what we charge for our reprints. We do sell files. So if people want to just have files to do with what they want, JPEGs, which is a lower quality scan, we sell for $15. Higher quality TIFF scans, we sell for $15. And we do offer prints. We go through a local printer. We do offer prints, but generally, I find more now that people are wanting the files because then they can, they can have them for their records and they can use them for their own enjoyment. We do have image use fees. Personal and educational, we don't require a use fee, but for print media and other kinds of media, if somebody wants to put an image on a website or use it in social media, then we have other fees that go along with that. So, I've talked about using photos in social media, and I just wanted to point out that social media posts will often generate interest in purchases. I do frequently get people who will contact me and say, hey, I saw your picture, this picture on social media, could I get a copy of it? The kinds of people who are looking to purchase photos, the kinds of people who contact me, relatives and descendants, that's an obvious one. Local businesses love this stuff. I sell probably 3/4 of my photos to local businesses. And it's a great way to get in-kind sponsorships. We have a rather large photo order from a few months ago, and it was from a food distributor in town, and they wanted to decorate they have a retail store and they wanted to decorate it with old photos from Eau Claire. And so they, in exchange, they did pay us some money, but they're also going to cater some of our events. So you can get in-kind donations this way. Lots of people, like authors who are writing books and want to illustrate them, will often use the photos. So let's see here. Oh, I did want to just mention, I kind of out of curiosity went and looked through and to see how much money we do make. It's been, like I said, I'm brand new here, and last year was kind of an off year, so we don't really have good numbers from last year. But fiscal year 18, we did about $2,500 in sales. Fiscal year 19, close to 3,000. And this year to date, we have about $1,800 in sales. So between $2,000 and $3,000, I'd say would be a good estimate. You probably, if you decide to sell photos, you probably will want to designate one person who handles your orders, so that it does take a little bit of coordination, and it does take time. And so you would want somebody who is in charge of the project or in charge of selling them, so that that person knows what's going on. You could just sell files if you want to. You don't have to go through all the work and expense of having the files printed, and so you can make them available to the public. So that is kind of how I use our digital media, and I will turn it over then to our next presenter.
Great, thanks, Jodi. My name is Jennifer Gurske. I'm the Program and Technology Manager at the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation. We are a pretty small nonprofit organization established in 1974. Like Kristen said, we celebrate, educate about, advocate for historic places in the Madison area, and that can even go as far as Baraboo, actually. So the Madison area is pretty broad for us. This project started actually just after I started with the trust about 3 years ago. In the summer of 2019, I actually wanted to close down our office. It was expensive. We had a lot of overhead costs for it, and it just made sense. And actually, it was good we did it with the pandemic and all that stuff that happened. So we had to figure out what to do with a lot of our material that was in just file drawers. It'd been collected since 1974. No one had any idea what was in there. I definitely didn't. And we wanted to figure out a way to digitize it. And so with that, we had to, or I had to go to our board of trustees to get approval for that. So next slide, great. So these are some of the more important reasons I gave to our board of trustees. These are photos of basically what things looked like when we took them out of the file drawers. We just had everything. We had photographs, we had newspaper clippings, we had brochures, everything. And it had just sort of been stuffed in kind of by date, maybe by place. So we didn't have a lot of organization in here. And, we went to the board and said, these are the reasons we would like to save some money by getting rid of the space and by digitizing the material. Really, one of the most important things for us was making this material public. People come to us pretty often asking for historical documentation, and we just didn't even know it was in there. We said they could come into our office and take a look. But we really wanted to give public access to the material, and our board was interested in that. They were definitely interested in an inventory also of what we really had, and that would benefit them also. The board would have easier access to documents too, and we could establish new relationships with people. We definitely want to reach out to more organizations, even within the state of Wisconsin, to collaborate and to share material, and that was important to us, definitely. Next slide. So this getting started was a little bit tricky. I was very new to this. I'd worked with digital files before, but hadn't really been in this situation where I didn't know the material. And Vicki Tobias, who of Recollection Wisconsin, she came to our office just before we closed it down and walked through a lot of the material with me. And she ended up giving us a summary and recommendations. And that was really this first step. That helped us say, okay, so now we've maybe got this type of material, and this is what we can do with it to digitize it. So it gave us a little more confidence, I think, in stepping outside of what we were used to, having the paper copies, and moving into something else. It helped us also realize that there were lots of grant opportunities. We applied for the mini grant program, which I think has been mentioned a couple times. So we received $430 in a matching grant, and the board was okay with doing the matching grant, which was great. And it's a small amount of money, but it gave us the opportunity to buy a scanner and 2 5-terabyte hard drives. So that kind of got us to this place where we could start. So we knew we've got a scanner, we've got the hard drives, we can figure out where to go from there. We established this relationship with the UWI school. So library and archive students, these were students who were specifically interested in the archiving. We first worked with, when we established the relationship with the iSchool, actually, we first worked with a class, and 4 students took on a project for the final class project of doing an appraisal or a collection evaluation for us. And they made recommendations then from that evaluation on what we could do with it. So working with those students and being able to get their recommendations on what they thought it was a good experience for them to come in and look at our archives. And it was great for us because we got this outline. They didn't index, but they sort of categorized each box into some specific topic. And then we could then take that topic and sort of move forward. And with that, we ended up getting another student, who's a grad student from the iSchool, who did an independent study with us. And he got, I think, a credit for that. And he was able to actually begin the scanning process. So he took the recommendations from the 4 students who did the appraisal, and then he was able to come in and start scanning. We got a metadata sheet recommendation from Recollection Wisconsin, and that kind of gave us parameters kind of on what we felt we wanted, and then we tweaked it based on specific information that we had. One other thing to note on here is multiple backups. So we have the 2 5-terabyte hard drives that we use. We also back up everything to the cloud, and we use a service called Backblaze. If you lose a hard drive or you lose your backups, they actually send you hard drives in the mail. And if you take that material, download it, and then you send them back to hard drives, it's free. So it's a great backup place that I've used personally, actually, for a hard drive crash. So backups are definitely important. Next slide. So this is just a very small excerpt, and I know it's very small. You probably won't be able to read it, but of what our metadata sheet looks like. So it's maybe a quarter of the entire sheet. But this is what we initially got from Recollection Wisconsin, and then we use going forward. So with the projects, we've hit a couple of roadblocks, which is very normal for digitizing. Changing staff, obviously. We did, last year, we got a grant from the Wills Ideas to Action Fund, which I think was also mentioned here. And we were able to hire an archives assistant. So that means, we've also had 2 volunteers that were with the trust who've also worked on our archives project. So we've had 4 people in here working, who've been categorizing, who've been doing this sort of on the ground work for us, because I'm not able to use my time for this project. So that's been challenging. We've had to kind of go back, fix some maybe naming issues that we've had, some file naming issues. We've had to be cognizant. I've had to be involved in the process. So even though I don't work it, I meet with our archives assistant, if not every week, every other week. And I keep an eye kind of on the spreadsheet. So I'm always sort of looking at things. I'm looking at the collection. I'm looking at the PDFs or the TIFFs that we are scanning in, and just making sure that that's sort of following the progression that we want for the project, even though I can't do the work. Out-of-date hardware, meaning like we have floppy disks, or we have things in the files that are hard to digitize, because we don't have the resources for it. So then we have to look to other places, whether that's the Wisconsin Historical Society or the UW, to try to get those things scanned. And that's been a little bit of a challenge for us. One thing too that actually I didn't mention on here is copyright. So if you're staying for the 11:30 presentation with Molly, I would definitely recommend it if you have copyright questions, because that's been a big challenge for us. You know, our archives has been collected since 1974. I don't even know how many volunteers have put material in there, and we don't know where a lot of it's from. And designating a copyright for it is a challenge. We're still working through a lot of those issues, and I'm actually looking forward to Molly's talk. Next slide. And this is kind of where we are right now. So obviously it's taken a couple years to get to this point. We're not finished. This is our archives assistant. This is our current setup that we have. We do still have everything in boxes, but she has a nice office space. Fiore in Madison has donated a conference room to us for the last 2 years. So that space has really helped us not have to move things from place to place. We've been able to really sort of centralize where the scanning happens. We were, just as a side note, we were donated a number of old Parade of Homes books because this gentleman's father was an architect and a draftsman, and he sketched a lot of the sort of the sketched photographs that are in the old Parade of Homes booklets. So we're going to scan those. We're in the process of doing that. We haven't put anything online yet. We are going to hopefully do that with Recollection Wisconsin, and we hope to have some of that up January 2022 is our goal. But I definitely see the project doing another year or two. And we just did a Wisconsin Humanities grant. And so that's another grant option that's out there. And we're hoping that will sort of get us farther into the next year, that we'll be able to kind of keep with the archives assistant process that we have, so we can keep some consistency with who's working on the project. But otherwise, we feel like there have been challenges because we're a small organization and we really have only put $430 towards this project in total. And so it's been a challenge, but it's been worth it, because now we have the metadata sheet. I can search it. We have electronic documents on hard drives, even though we haven't officially moved them to the searching system of Recollection Wisconsin. We still have more accessibility to things than we've ever had. And when people come to us now, we can say we do have that. We can share it with them now, but hopefully eventually down the line, they'll be able to actually search online for it and find it themselves. So we're hopeful of that, but we definitely recommend it.
All right. I don't think I put a slide in here for the question time, so I'm just going to leave this up here for right now. But we have a couple of questions that have come through in chat, mostly relating to copyright, which is probably not surprising to anybody. So here's a couple of questions. And these are for all three of you. And I know I've talked to all three of you about some of these things, so I know you have good information to share. Steve Rice asks, have you had requests for photos for commercial reproduction, posters, t-shirts, etc.? If so, how did you handle the fees and permissions?
I assume that I should be answering this question. So yes, we do get commercial requests. I guess I haven't run across any kind of like t-shirts or anything like that, but we do, I don't know, Kristen, are you able to go back to my slide that has
Will do.
Okay, that has the information about what we charge?
Yep, going back.
Okay. So essentially, if it's somebody that wants to use our photos in order to make money, we charge them for the file or the print if we do the print. And then on top of that is a fee. So you can see that personal and educational are free, or nonprofit, they're all free. We don't charge an image use fee. We do charge to use or for a file or for a print though. Print media, lots of books we get. from people, are people writing books, and most of them are generally just something for a family history or something like that. If it's for a family history that they're just going to give around to their relatives, that's personal use. But we do have people that write local histories, and generally it's around under $3,000. So then that'd be a $20 fee per image. And it's a one-time fee. So does that answer the question? Was there any, I can't remember the whole question.
That's okay. How do you handle permissions? Did you answer that part already?
Permissions, as far as permission,
Like,
oh yeah, okay.
Go
On
ahead.
our so Kristen is going to share some of the handouts that I wasn't able to put in my slides, but there is an order form that we use, and that also has the permissions for use on it that they have to sign. There's like, the terms of the agreement. So we get that from them. As far as following up, we don't really do that unless we happen, sometimes if we know that there's an organization that's going to be using our photos on Facebook, we'll go and see how they're using them. I don't specifically do a follow-up. We haven't had issues yet, but that if it becomes a problem, we'd have to address that down the road.
So one of the other questions we got is very similar, and I've heard Russ's philosophy on this, so I think he should share it. Here's the other question. What are legal rights to the photos and books being scanned from the original into the organization's database? And then as you are selling, how is that regulated or tracked to ensure using properly? So Russ, do you want to take this one? Russ, I think you might be muted. Russ, I think you might be muted. We can't hear you.
All right.
Hi, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
So most of the photos that we get that we're interested in, a lot of them, are really old, like copyright issues. They often were widely circulated as postcards and other things. And so we treat the things that come in there as probably publicly available. They've been given to us by people without any restrictions. Some are actually from the families, and we just ask them. So essentially the photos and documents and things that we have are almost all without us worrying about copyrights. Okay, maybe someday we will have to, but we just pretty much ignore that. Of course, if we do scan books that are in copyright, but they're not shared publicly. They're used for our own references. For instance, a book on some local history that's still in sale, we try to get a digital copy because people wanting to, we have a lot of genealogy access requests. And so people wanting to search something, we just say, we'll search the book. Automatically, Google does this magically. And anyway, then we do tell them, okay, you can look in this book, and we may have the copy of the book there for them to look at, or they could buy it if they want to. So it's sort of an index into the copyright ones. Okay.
Thanks, Russ. There's going to be a lot more information from copyright coming, or on copyright coming from Molly, as Jennifer said. So that'll be a little bit after the break at 11:30. So stick around for that if you have copyright questions. What other questions do we have for our panelists?
I'll make another comment. I come at this differently, I see, than most of the others that are involved in museums. I'm a technical person, and I am interested in the content of files because I do research, I do books, and so forth. And so I want to know what's in them, and I'm not really as concerned about the selling of them or organizational things. And so I really got started because I wanted the information available easily and so that I could use it easily. And that's the motivation. Selling photos and that that gets into the business of a museum, and that's not my interest. There are other people that do that.
Russ, you also shared a link in the chat to a foot pedal operated rapid scanning camera.
Well,
Um,
we got these mini grants, and we have a negative scanner we share. We got this foot pedal operated camera that you can zip through a book in 20 minutes. You can take a whole old record book and scan the whole thing. It's not high resolution. It's 300 dots per inch and JPEG files, but we're looking for the content readability of a church record or a book, an old book that's falling apart. This is non-destructive in the sense that you just open the book and hold it open a little bit and take a picture and push your foot, turn the page, push your foot. And I demonstrated it there. We got that because the Wisconsin Historical, the mini grant program, liked our idea that we were going to share that. So right now, it's in the Luck Museum in the back part. That's the Ravenholt Family History Center, which is the Genealogy Society's thing. I brought it over from the Cushing, our museum in our area, as a loan. And the person from the Amory Historical Society comes up and is copying some township records there. So this is one of those examples of a shared resource. Right, there are 4 groups right now using it all together in that. And as I said, the WHS really loves shared resources.
It's one of the goals of this community of practice is that if folks can connect with other nearby organizations, you know, can you all come up with a sort of shared equipment situation as well? Emily just put a question in the chat here for Russ. How far afield do you loan this equipment? If a group wanted to borrow it, would they contact you?
Sure. I think maybe Chautauqua or something, well, you know, like 100 miles is so far. The only problem is we like to teach you how to use it and make sure that it works okay. And so we probably would suggest you come to one of our sites and learn how to use it and then take it with you. Some of them they're not terribly complicated to use, but you have to hook them up. We can loan you the computer, a laptop that goes with them too. Anyway, I find that most museum people aren't as technical as I am, and so that I feel like we really need to give them a good helping start so they understand how to use it easily. Otherwise, it gets so frustrating. And so, yeah, anyone, anywhere who wants to borrow it and can get it from us without having a lot of complication, we would loan it to. Our negative scanner was used quite widely. Then the COVID time came, and so we haven't had it out on the road for a year. But I mean, how many people need to scan 8 by 10 glass negatives? Each museum probably has a few, and so the wider it goes, the better that it is. We've done ours.
We have another question for Russ from Tammy and the in-person folks. How large is the scan area for the piece of equipment that you're talking about? I think they mean the foot pedal scanner.
No, I've tried that. I wanted to do these old record books that are really quite large. Normally, standing on its own pedal or on the table where you're working can do maybe 20 inches wide. However, I stack up a whole bunch of books and bring it way up in the air, and then I can scan a newspaper full page. It's not wonderful quality, but it's perfectly readable, and Google will do the OCR on it that way. So I haven't had a limit. This one was it's not the best one. We bought a used, trying to be efficient, we bought a refurbished CZUR, which is some kind of a Chinese one. And the software was a little flaky with it, but it sure does a fast job of what I want done. And the video will show you with some evaluation of it. there are other ones that are much better and more expensive and have better software, but this worked for us.
And Emily just put a link to the specs for that scanner in the chat. And I just looked it up quickly. It looks like you can get this scanner for somewhere between $300 and $500, which is probably a lot less than most people are thinking of.
Yeah, well, watch the video first because there are some issues with it, but I mean,
Sure.
and then the other part of this is there are better ones. I mean, so if your budget isn't limited, we went to eBay or Amazon where they were selling refurbished ones, so it was $300. And then our grant was for the original amount of something like $500. And so then we bought a used laptop to go with it too. So we managed to get it in under $700.
So we've got one more minute left before we go to break. Does anybody else have questions for any of our three panelists, Russ or Jodi or Jennifer? Or comments to add? There's some really great resources flying in the chat. So again, we're going to save everything from this chat and put it into a nice summary document and share it with you after the fair. So if you're not catching everything, no problem. All right, well, thank you to all three of you for these very helpful and informative presentations. We really appreciate it and hope you'll stick around for the rest of the fair if you would like to, especially the information from the Historical Society's Local History Outreach Program and Molly Huber from the Minnesota Digital Library. All right, we're going to go to another break. We will hear from Liz Arbuckle from the Wisconsin Historical Society at 11 a.m. So we will see you back here in 10 minutes.